Hello there, and welcome to Sleepy Earth, where quiet curiosity meets deep questions, and wonder is allowed to take its time. I invite you to settle in, let the noise of the day soften, and allow your imagination to stretch a little further than usual. Tonight we're not here for breaking news or quick answers. Instead, we'll be lingering in the slower spaces where history, science, and speculation blend like threads of an old tapestry. Now, when most of us think about dinosaurs, the picture is familiar. Towering giants, teeth and claws, a world of predators and prey, and then suddenly a fiery end with an asteroid striking Earth. It's a story we know so well that it feels closed, almost complete. But what if the story isn't finished in the way we assume? What if there are chapters we haven't even considered? Because here's a thought worth pausing on. Humans have only been here for the briefest flicker of time, yet dinosaurs ruled the Earth for more than 160 million years. That's an unimaginably long canvas, and it leads us to a simple, unsettling question. What if we're not the first intelligent species to walk this Earth? When we think of dinosaurs, we usually imagine a world both strange and familiar, a landscape of towering beasts, massive predators, and forests echoing with sounds that no human ear has ever truly heard. It is a story so ingrained in childhood, books, museum halls, and pop culture that it almost feels like a myth. Yet, unlike a myth, the story of dinosaurs is grounded in rock, in bone, and in time, an ancient record written across layers of Earth itself. Dinosaurs first appeared during the Triassic period, around 230 million years ago. The Earth, then, was a place both alien and oddly recognizable. Instead of 7 continents, most land was fused into one massive supercontinent called Pangaea. Its climate was harsh, with long, dry seasons and extreme temperature swings. Out of that crucible emerged small, agile creatures, early dinosaurs that did not yet dominate, but carried the seeds of what was to come. By the Jurassic period, about 200 million years ago, dinosaurs had diversified into extraordinary forms. Some grew immense, like the long-necked sauropods whose sheer size was a strategy for survival. Others honed speed and predatory skill, like the ancestors of the great theropods. Forests spread, seas teemed with reptiles and early marine life. And for millions of years, dinosaurs became not just participants in the ecosystem, but rulers of it. Then came the Cretaceous, a time when the Earth looked more like the world we recognize today. Flowers bloomed for the first time, insects buzzed with new diversity, and dinosaurs reached the height of their power. The Tyrannosaurus rex, the Triceratops, the raptors, these are the celebrities of the fossil record. Yet behind those names was a staggering variety of species: feathered hunters, horned grazers, armored giants, and even the small, bird-like creatures that would eventually give rise to the sparrows and pigeons outside your window. It is tempting to see dinosaurs only through the lens of power and scale, the biggest, the fiercest, the strangest. But perhaps the more astonishing fact is their endurance. Dinosaurs thrived for roughly 165 million years. To put that into perspective, humans, in our modern form, have existed for about 300,000 years. If all of Earth's history were compressed into a single day, humanity would occupy only the last few seconds before midnight, while dinosaurs would have filled the clock from early afternoon until dusk. And then, as the story usually goes, came the end. 66 million years ago, a massive asteroid struck near the Yucatan Peninsula, releasing energy greater than billions of atomic bombs. Fires raged, skies darkened, climates shifted, and in the ecological collapse that followed, most dinosaurs disappeared. What remains of them are fragments, fossilized bones, footprints frozen in stone, and the living descendants we call birds. This is the narrative we know: a rise, a rain, a sudden fall. The arc is so clean, so complete, that it feels almost scripted. But is it really so simple? Earth's story is rarely neat, and extinction, like survival, is rarely absolute. Not every lineage died, not every corner of the planet experienced the same devastation. And over 165 million years, an almost ungraspable stretch of time, what else might have happened, what experiments in life might have unfolded that left little or no trace behind? That is the threshold at which science meets imagination. On one side we have the fossils, the data, the record we can hold in hand. On the other side we have silence, gaps, and the tantalizing possibility that within those gaps lie stories far stranger than anything we've yet considered. Because here is the truth. Even the most complete fossil beds represent only a whisper of what once was. For every dinosaur skeleton in a museum, there are countless species we will never know, erased by time, crushed by geology, dissolved by chemistry, or simply buried in places we may never look. If such enormous creatures can vanish so thoroughly, what else might have disappeared, unseen, unimagined? The familiar past gives us the ground beneath our feet. It offers the framework, the dates, the bones, the images reconstructed in textbooks and documentaries. But the familiar past also creates a kind of blind spot. We think we know the story, and so we stop asking questions, and yet questions remain. Why did some species thrive for tens of millions of years, while others vanished quickly? What evolutionary paths were abandoned, forgotten by time? What if survival favored not only strength or size, but something subtler, something like intelligence? It is here, in this overlap between what we know and what we can only imagine, that our journey truly begins. We accept the factual backbone that dinosaurs existed, that they dominated, that they fell. But around that skeleton of certainty, we begin to add speculative flesh. What if, in those 165 million years, intelligence took root in ways we have not yet considered? What if, somewhere in the vast forests of the Jurassic or the flowering plains of the Cretaceous, a spark of technological curiosity flickered, not ours but theirs? The familiar past sets the stage. The mystery lies in what might have happened beyond it. When we think of intelligence, we almost always picture ourselves. We imagine humans standing at the top of a ladder, the pinnacle of mental ability, looking down at the rest of the animal kingdom. But nature doesn't really work in ladders. It works in branches, in experiments, in countless ways of solving the puzzle of survival. And when we pause to look closely, we find that intelligence is not a singular crown, but a mosaic, scattered across the tree of life in surprising and humbling ways. Take the crow, for example. In parts of New Caledonia, these sleek black birds have been observed crafting tools from twigs, stripping them into hooks to pull grubs from tree bark. They don't just stumble upon the right shape, they design it, passing knowledge from one bird to another, a kind of cultural transmission. In laboratory settings, crows have bent bits of wire into tools on the spot, improvising in ways that feel strikingly inventive. Then there are the dolphins, sleek denizens of the sea. They recognize themselves in mirrors, a test many animals fail. They communicate in signature whistles, unique to each individual, almost like names. They've been seen teaching one another to use sponges as protective nose guards while foraging on the seafloor. This is not instinct passed by genes. It is learning, shared and adapted. And the octopus, perhaps the strangest example of all. With no bones, no central skeleton, and a brain shaped unlike ours, these creatures display an uncanny cleverness. They solve puzzles, escape aquariums, and even play pranks on unsuspecting caretakers by squirting jets of water at lights or humans. With lifespans often shorter than a dog's, they somehow achieve a depth of problem-solving that suggests intelligence can emerge in alien forms, even under very different evolutionary pressures. Closer to home, we find the great apes, chimpanzees, cracking nuts with stone tools, gorillas showing rudimentary sign language, orangutans remembering how to dismantle complex locks. And then, of course, elephants, creatures of memory and emotion, who mourn their dead, who can cooperate to solve challenges and whose social bonds rival our own in complexity. All of this leads us to a humbling realization. Intelligence is not unique, nor is it linear. It arises wherever it is useful, whether in trees, oceans, skies, or savannas. It wears many masks, expressed through different senses, different bodies, and different needs. And what does this mean for dinosaurs? Here, the story takes a fascinating turn, because dinosaurs are not entirely gone. Their closest living relatives are birds, creatures we often underestimate, but which carry striking signs of mental sophistication. Parrots, for instance, can learn hundreds of words, not just mimicking sounds, but understanding context. Ravens can solve multi-step puzzles that stump young human children. Pigeons, humble as they seem, can distinguish between styles of art, identifying a Monet from a Picasso more reliably than chance would predict. If birds, with their small bodies and pea-sized brains, can demonstrate this level of cleverness, what might their dinosaur ancestors have been capable of? Especially when some species of dinosaur possessed brains proportionally larger than their body size would suggest. The troodontids, small, bird-like predators, had some of the highest brain-to-body ratios among dinosaurs. Paleontologists have long speculated that, given enough time, these creatures might have evolved into something far more complex, perhaps even tool-using beings. And yet caution is needed. Intelligence is not inevitable. It is not a straight road leading to us. For hundreds of millions of years, crocodiles have thrived without needing higher cognition. Sharks, older still, have remained effective predators without complex culture or language. Survival is not measured by intellect alone, and often simplicity is the winning strategy. Still, it is difficult to ignore the hints. Across the span of life, nature has shown a tendency to experiment with minds, scattering little embers of cleverness wherever opportunity allows. If in just a few million years crows and dolphins have achieved their feats, what might 165 million years have allowed dinosaurs to explore? There is another layer worth considering: the relationship between environment and intelligence. Intelligence often blooms under pressure when survival requires innovation. Changing climates, shifting continents, evolving prey and predators, all of these were constants in the age of dinosaurs. Might these challenges have nudged certain species toward mental flexibility, just as ice ages and shifting ecosystems did for our own ancestors? This is where science brushes against mystery. We have no diaries of dinosaurs, no preserved record of thought. We cannot peer into their long-vanished eyes and know what they understood. But we can trace the patterns. Intelligence is possible. Intelligence is diverse. Intelligence has risen not once, but many times. And if it has happened before, it is not impossible that it happened in ways we have yet to uncover. The animal kingdom today reminds us of this. We are surrounded by other minds, some alien, some familiar, all extraordinary in their own right. And these minds whisper a possibility that intelligence, far from being a human invention, might be an earthly tradition, one that long predates us, and so we return to our central thread. If intelligence is not uniquely ours, if birds carry echoes of dinosaur cleverness, if octopuses can solve puzzles and crows can craft tools, then we are left with a provocative thought. During the vast sweep of the Mesozoic, might intelligence have stirred in forms we can barely imagine? Minds that looked nothing like ours, but that were nevertheless awake, aware, and curious in their own right. This is the doorway through which speculation steps, for if nature has planted seeds of cleverness across oceans and forests, across mammals and birds, then surely, across the deep forests and plains of the Jurassic and Cretaceous, such seeds might also have grown. Perhaps not into cities or machines, not necessarily into technology as we define it, but into something intelligent enough to wonder, to plan, to dream. And it is here, at the edge of what is known, that our question sharpens. If intelligence did rise among the dinosaurs, could it ever have reached the level of a civilization? Could they, in their own way, have built worlds that vanished before ours began? Speculation often begins with a simple pause, the willingness to look at what we know, tilt it gently, and ask, what if the story could bend in another direction? With dinosaurs, that pause becomes irresistible, for they lived on Earth not for a brief flicker of time, but for 165 million years, long enough perhaps for more than teeth and claws to emerge. The idea may sound fantastical, yet even scientists have played with it. In the early 1980s, paleontologist Dale Russell proposed a thought experiment that became both famous and controversial. He imagined what might have happened if one particularly brainy group of dinosaurs, the troodontids, had continued to evolve after the Cretaceous. Troodontids were small, bird-like predators with relatively large brains for their size, binocular vision, and grasping hands. Russell speculated that given another 65 million years, these dinosaurs could have developed into a dinosauroid, a being upright and humanoid with large eyes, dexterous fingers, and a level of intelligence comparable to ours. The model was partly satire, partly provocation, a way of showing that evolutionary trajectories could, in theory, bend toward greater cognition. Yet it raised a question that lingers even today. Was there ever a path, however improbable, where dinosaurs might have become truly intelligent, perhaps even technological? To explore this, we need to think about what conditions actually foster intelligence. Evolution doesn't hand out large brains as a reward for existing. It shapes them when they are useful. For humans, shifting climates, scarcity of food, and the need for cooperation seem to have been catalysts. Could dinosaurs have faced similar pressures? The Mesozoic was not a static paradise. Continents drifted apart, seas advanced and retreated, and climates shifted dramatically. Entire ecosystems rose and collapsed. Survival meant adaptation, and adaptation often rewards flexibility, learning, and communication. Consider again the troodontids. With their sharp senses and relatively advanced brains, they were already experimenting with traits we often associate with intelligence. Their keen eyesight suggests hunting strategies that required planning. Their grasping hands hint at the potential for manipulating objects. If evolution had nudged them further in that direction, could they have crossed the threshold from cleverness to true cognition? Of course, not all paleontologists agree. Many argue that dinosaurs, for all their diversity, were not under selective pressure to evolve high intelligence. Large herbivores thrived through size and defensive adaptations. Apex predators, like Tyrannosaurus rex, dominated through brute force. Brains are expensive organs, demanding constant fuel. Unless intelligence conferred a clear survival advantage, natural selection would have had little reason to favor it. And yet, the counterpoint is compelling. Brains do not always evolve for obvious reasons. Octopuses, as we've seen, are highly intelligent, yet they have no long-term societies, no technology, and lifespans too short to reap evolutionary benefits from complex culture. Still, intelligence arose. Nature, it seems, sometimes invests in minds for reasons we do not entirely understand. So we stand at a crossroad of speculation. On one side, the skeptics, Dinosaurs were successful as they were, without needing advanced intelligence, and the fossil record shows no trace of civilization. On the other side, the dreamers, given 165 million years, is it really impossible that some line of dinosaur life might have walked the path toward thought, communication, and perhaps something more? Let us imagine gently without rushing toward certainty. Suppose a lineage of smaller social dinosaurs began to rely more and more on cooperation, hunting together, protecting one another, learning from shared experience. Over generations, their brains might have grown slightly larger, their behaviors more complex. Communication, whether through sound, gesture, or color, could have deepened. Perhaps they began to manipulate their environment, first clumsily, then with intention. Would they have discovered fire? Perhaps not, at least not as we did. Dinosaurs lacked the delicate hands that make human tool use so versatile, but intelligence need not mirror ours. They might have developed technologies based not on flame and metal, but on other resources. Resonance of sound, harnessing water, constructing shelters from plants and mud. Their technology might have looked alien, incomprehensible to us, and yet no less remarkable to them. We must also consider the vastness of time. Humans built their first cities only about 6,000 years ago. Dinosaurs had tens of millions of years longer. If just one species had taken the first steps toward culture, toward cumulative knowledge, what strange and fleeting civilizations might have bloomed and disappeared before the asteroid struck? Civilizations are not of steel and stone, but of organic material, ephemeral, and almost impossible to preserve in the fossil record. This brings us to another uncomfortable truth. The Earth is remarkably efficient at erasing its own history. Mountains rise and erode, oceans expand and contract. Tectonic plates recycle the crust, dragging ancient surfaces deep into the mantle. Even if an intelligent dinosaur species had built villages or monuments, after 65 million years, the odds of us finding them would be vanishingly small. So the question remains open, tantalizing, and haunting. Not did it happen, because we cannot know, but could it have? Could dinosaurs have evolved minds like ours, or minds unlike ours but equally aware? Minds capable of curiosity, of imagination, perhaps even of wonder? This is where science and story meet. Science gives us the evidence, fossils, timelines, and evolutionary logic. The story permits us to ask the question science cannot yet answer. Together they create a space of gentle speculation where imagination can stretch without breaking. And perhaps this is the greater lesson. Intelligence is not a destiny. It is a possibility that flickers across the branches of life, sometimes catching fire, sometimes fading unseen. Dinosaurs remind us of that possibility, not because we know they were intelligent like us, but because we cannot fully rule it out. As we leave this section, we carry forward a seed, the seed of speculation that says, if they could have, what would their world have looked like? And that is where we turn next, into the dreamscape of imagination, where we try to picture not just whether dinosaurs might have had minds, but what they might have built with them. Speculation is a fragile art. It asks us to step into the unknown, not with the arrogance of certainty, but with the humility of imagination. If we allow ourselves to wander carefully, gently, we can begin to picture what a civilization might have looked like had dinosaurs, in some distant branch of possibility, crossed the threshold into intelligence, not as humans, not as reflections of ourselves, but as something wholly their own. Let us begin with their bodies. Hands, as we know them, are rare in nature. Humans rely on opposable thumbs for everything from weaving baskets to building spacecraft. Dinosaurs, however, had claws, talons, and sometimes stiff, wing-like forelimbs. If a civilization emerged, its technology would not have been shaped by delicate fingers, but by the tools their bodies already provided. Imagine creatures with curved claws using them not just for hunting, but for carving, scraping, or shaping wood and stone. Their dexterity might not have matched ours, but intelligence finds ways around limitations. Perhaps they used their feet, their tails, or even a collaborative effort, several individuals working together to manipulate heavy objects that a single one could not. Now imagine communication. Human societies are built upon language, spoken words weaving shared meaning across generations. Dinosaurs, many of them bird-like, may have communicated in complex calls, whistles, or even color displays across feathers and skin. A conversation in such a society might not sound like ours at all. It could be a symphony of trills, guttural rumbles, or shifting hues, communication as both sound and spectacle. Knowledge might have been passed in ways that were not only heard, but seen, felt, and embodied. And what of their environment? Civilizations reflect the landscapes in which they rise. Humans built with stone because stone was plentiful, durable, and workable. Dinosaurs might have built with other resources, massive fronds, hardened mud, woven vegetation. Structures could have resembled enormous nests or hive-like clusters that blended with forests. Some species might have shaped burrows, tunnels, or canopies that offered protection from predators. Unlike our sharp, angular cities, theirs might have seemed organic, almost camouflaged, designed to merge with rather than dominate their ecosystems. Technology, too, would have followed unfamiliar paths. Fire, for instance, is central to human advancement. But would dinosaurs have discovered or used it? Many were cold-blooded or partially warm-blooded, and some lived in climates where fire was less common. Instead of flame, they might have developed other forms of harnessing energy, perhaps using water currents to drive rudimentary mills, or learning to direct wind through carved hollows that produced resonance and sound. Technology need not be metallic and fiery. It can be musical, fluid, or ephemeral. Consider art. Every known intelligent species we recognize, humans, but also elephants, dolphins, and even certain birds, shows some tendency toward play, rhythm, or decoration. A dinosaur civilization might have expressed itself in vibrant feather patterns, arranged stones, or resonant calls echoing across valleys. Instead of painting caves, perhaps they choreographed displays of sound and color, ephemeral but unforgettable. Their art may have been alive, moving, inseparable from the bodies that carried it. And then, society. Would they have been solitary inventors or collective builders? Many dinosaurs were social, traveling in herds, nesting together, and raising young communally. If intelligence arose in such a species, their society might have been profoundly cooperative. Decisions could have been shared, not dictated by lone rulers. Technology might have advanced not through competition, but through collective memory, each generation adding to the wisdom of the last. Knowledge could have been sung, displayed, or performed, carried not in books or tablets, but in rituals woven into daily life. But let's pause here. It is easy, perhaps too easy, to imagine them as mirrors of us, building cities, creating tools, developing hierarchies. Yet we must remind ourselves, intelligence does not always produce technology. Dolphins are intelligent, yet they have no cities. Octopuses are ingenious, yet they live solitary lives. If dinosaur minds had bloomed, they might have chosen paths. Unrecognizable to us, their civilization might not have been material at all. It could have been a civilization of behavior, of song, of shared memory, carried in bodies and voices rather than in stone and steel. A culture invisible to the fossil record, yet no less real. Still, it is fascinating to ask, what traces would such a civilization leave? Our own cities, if erased by 65 million years, would leave little behind. Skyscrapers would crumble, plastics would break down, metals would corrode. In deep time, even human civilization might vanish almost entirely, leaving only subtle chemical fingerprints in the soil. For dinosaurs, any civilization they might have created could have been even more ephemeral, woven from plants, feathers, mud, and sound. The odds of such a culture leaving clear evidence for us today would be vanishingly small, and yet in this very fragility lies the wonder. If dinosaurs ever created a civilization, it may have been delicate, transient, and quickly erased. But does that make it less meaningful? Must technology always be measured by durability, by the ability to scar the earth? Perhaps the beauty of such a civilization would have been precisely its impermanence, flaring briefly, then fading into the silence of time. There is also the possibility of specialization. Imagine, for instance, a species that lived in coastal regions, learning to craft tools from shells and coral, perhaps even shaping rafts or platforms to navigate lagoons. Or perhaps a species of forest-dwelling dinosaurs that developed elaborate nesting colonies, evolving into vast communal structures. Others may have explored acoustics, turning hollow bones or natural caves into resonant chambers, creating what we might call music, but which for them was communication, ritual, or even technology. The spectrum of possibilities is wide. Civilizations are not limited to cities and metals. They can be spiritual, artistic, or ecological. A dinosaur civilization might have been one that worked not against nature but within it, less visible, less permanent, but deeply sophisticated in its own right. And then the ending. Suppose such a civilization did arise, perhaps only in scattered pockets, perhaps never spreading across the globe. When the asteroid struck 66 million years ago, its fires and darkness would have consumed them, just as it consumed countless other species. Their memory would have vanished with them, leaving no trace but the faint suggestion that intelligence in some form might not be uniquely human after all. This vision is speculative, fragile, and perhaps unprovable, but it serves a deeper purpose. It expands our imagination of what civilization can mean. It reminds us that intelligence is not a straight road leading only to us, but a branching possibility, one that might have been explored in ways we will never know. And it humbles us with the realization that even if we too were to vanish tomorrow, the Earth would move on. One day, millions of years from now, perhaps another species might stand where we stand, asking the same question about us. What if they had built a civilization before us, one that time has already erased? And so, as we close this section, we hold the image lightly, not as fact, but as possibility. Dinosaurs may never have built cities, forged tools, or written stories. Or perhaps in their own fleeting way they did. Either way, the exercise is not to prove, but to wonder. In the wandering, we glimpse the vastness of time, the fragility of memory, and the endless creativity of life. When we imagine ancient civilizations, our minds turn to the familiar remnants of humanity. Pyramids rising against desert skies, weathered temples carved into mountainsides, fragments of pottery buried in soil. These traces anchor us to the reality of our past. They are solid, visible, and enduring. Yet all of them are astonishingly young when compared to the age of the Earth. The Great Pyramid of Giza is less than 5,000 years old. Stonehenge, about 4,500. Even the most ancient cave paintings we know of, those delicate handprints in Spain and France, are little more than 40,000 years in age. Against the backdrop of 65 million years since the last dinosaur walked the Earth, these relics are barely whispers. This raises a sobering question. If our entire civilization, with its towers and highways, vanished tomorrow, how long would the evidence last? Concrete would crack, steel would rust, and glass would shatter. Within a few thousand years, vegetation would swallow our cities. Within a few million years, Mountains would rise and fall, glaciers would grind valleys, and rivers would erase the outlines of our work. In 10 million years, the surface of the Earth would hold almost nothing recognizably human. In 65 million, it is unlikely a single skyscraper or statue would survive intact. The Earth is not a museum. It is a recycler. Its crust is constantly broken, folded, melted, and remade. Entire continents drift like rafts across molten seas, colliding and tearing apart. Ocean floors spread and subduct, carrying away whatever rests upon them. Even mountains, seemingly eternal, are worn down by wind and rain until they become grains of sand. To expect a civilization, especially one tens of millions of years older than ours, to leave behind clear traces is to underestimate the power of geology. Scientists have a name for this line of thought, the Silurian hypothesis. Proposed in 2018 by NASA scientists Gavin Schmidt and Adam Frank, it asks, if an industrial civilization had existed on Earth long before humans, would we be able to detect it today? Their answer was unsettling. Physical artifacts, buildings, machines, tools would almost certainly be gone, but certain chemical traces might remain. Industrial activity, for example, leaves signals in the atmosphere and soil, carbon isotopes, synthetic compounds, layers of unusual sediment. These could, in theory, persist for millions of years. But even then, after tens of millions, erosion and tectonics would blur them to near invisibility. So if dinosaurs had ever created even a modest civilization, what would we expect to find? Perhaps faint anomalies in rock layers, strange spikes in carbon, odd distributions of minerals, sudden changes in fossilized ecosystems. And yet such signals could just as easily be explained by natural events, volcanic eruptions, meteor impacts, shifting climates. The record of the Earth is not precise, it is messy, layered, and ambiguous. To detect an ancient intelligence within, it would be like hearing a faint note of music buried inside a thunderstorm. There is also the problem of scale. Human civilization, vast as it seems to us, blankets only a fraction of the planet. Most of Earth's surface is untouched wilderness. If dinosaurs had built settlements in scattered pockets, say along coasts or river valleys, the odds of those places being preserved, undiscovered, and still recognizable after 65 million years are vanishingly small. The fossil record itself reminds us of this harsh reality. Dinosaurs lived for over 160 million years, yet we have only partial remains of a fraction of their species. Entire lineages may have existed without leaving behind a single fossil we've found. If bones themselves can vanish, what chance would wood, feather, or woven plant fiber have even human relics struggle against time? Archaeologists know well that organic materials, cloth, leather, wood, rarely survive beyond a few thousand years unless preserved in rare conditions like ice or desert. A hypothetical dinosaur civilization using perishable materials might have left almost nothing for us to discover. Their cities might have been forests shaped into structures, or mud nests the size of hills. Their tools might have been sharpened bone, smoothed rock, or woven vegetation. All of it could vanish without a trace, blending seamlessly into the ordinary processes of geology. And so when we look back across the abyss of time, we face a silence that may never be broken. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It may simply reflect the brutality of deep time. But there is a paradox here. The more we understand about the Earth's tendency to erase its own past, the more we realize how fragile our own story is. We think of our civilization as indelible, yet in geological terms it is temporary graffiti on a shifting canvas. If another intelligent species were to walk the Earth 100 million years from now, would they know we ever existed? Would they find our cities fossilized beneath the soil, or would they see only blank stone punctuated by a few odd chemical traces we once left behind? This perspective reframes our question about dinosaurs. Instead of asking, why don't we see evidence of their civilization? We might ask, why would we expect to? The Earth is not designed to preserve the fleeting experiments of life. Most species leave no trace at all. Civilizations, if they arise, may be erased even more completely. And yet there is also wonder in this absence, for it leaves space for imagination. The fossil record is incomplete, the geological archive imperfect, and within those gaps lies room for speculation. We can never prove that dinosaurs created technology, but we cannot fully disprove it either. The silence of the rocks is not a final verdict. It is an invitation to wonder, to think of evidence that hides is also to think of ourselves. What legacy will we leave? What marks will endure when we are gone? Perhaps only a thin layer in the strata, rich in plastics, metals, and the residues of combustion. To future eyes, we might appear as a strange geologic anomaly, a brief fever in the planet's long history. Dinosaurs, if they ever crossed the threshold into intelligence, may have left no more. And so we return to the paradox with which we began. The greatest absence may also be the greatest mystery. Perhaps no civilization ever existed before ours, or perhaps many have, each erased by the turning of Earth's endless cycles. Either way, the silence of the past humbles us, reminding us of how little we know and how fragile even the grandest of achievements may be against the patience of time. When we talk about dinosaurs, we often imagine them as an ancient prelude, creatures who lived and then perished so that mammals and eventually humans could take their place. In children's books, they are a chapter that closes with a comet, making way for the story we recognize as our own. But this framing hides a staggering truth. Dinosaurs were not a brief episode. They were not the opening act. They were the main story, spanning almost 160 million years. By comparison, modern humans, Homo sapiens, have existed for about 300,000 years. Our entire recorded history, from the first scratched symbols on clay tablets to the digital cloud of our present age, is less than 6,000 years old. Against the reign of dinosaurs, it is a flicker. If all of Earth's history were compressed into a single 24-hour day, dinosaurs would have ruled for nearly 4 hours. Humanity? We would appear only in the final half-second before midnight. The scale is almost impossible to comprehend. Consider this: the Tyrannosaurus rex lived closer in time to us than it did to the Stegosaurus. Entire epochs of dinosaur life, species, rising, thriving, and vanishing, passed before T-Rex ever set foot on the Earth. Their story was not a single, static chapter, but an ever-changing symphony of evolution. They endured climate shifts, rising seas, and drifting continents. They adapted and thrived through challenges that would have extinguished lesser creatures. For 160 million years, the world belonged to them, and then there is us. In just a few centuries, we have reshaped the planet more dramatically than most natural forces. We have split the atom, mapped the genome, and sent machines to other worlds. Our footprint is vast, but it is recent. Dinosaurs remind us of the difference between scale and speed. They were slow and enduring, shaping ecosystems across deep time. We are fast and disruptive, altering landscapes in the blink of a geological eye. The contrast raises a haunting question: which path is more likely to last? Is survival written in endurance, as with dinosaurs, or in innovation, as with us? Dinosaurs never built cities, but they thrived for millions upon millions of years. We build skyscrapers and satellites, but we do not yet know if our story will extend even 1 million years into the future. The fossil record offers another lesson. Most species that have ever lived are extinct. Dinosaurs remind us that dominance does not guarantee permanence. They were unmatched in size and diversity, yet when the asteroid struck, their reign ended almost overnight. In their place, mammals rose, not because we were stronger, but because chance, circumstance, and resilience aligned. Our own existence is the product of this delicate chain of accidents. This contrast between their longevity and our brevity carries a quiet humility. We often measure ourselves by what we have built, as if progress is the ultimate marker of success. Yet dinosaurs, without tools or technology, flourished longer than any civilization likely ever will. Their survival was not measured in monuments, but in persistence. They did not need to alter the earth to dominate it. They were woven into its rhythms. And yet we differ from them in another profound way. Dinosaurs may have endured, but humans— remember, we imagine, we record, we tell stories, we look backward and forward in time, bridging the past with speculation about the future. Dinosaurs lived within the flow of deep time. Humans stand apart from it, questioning it, seeking meaning in it. Perhaps this is the truest contrast. They embodied endurance, while we embody reflection. Their story is written in fossils, ours is written in words, data, and memory. They shaped ecosystems unconsciously. We shape them deliberately, for better or worse. It leaves us with a delicate balance to consider. Dinosaurs remind us that life can persist for immense spans without technology. Humans remind ourselves that technology can collapse in an instant if misused. Between their endurance and our innovation lies a question. Will our brilliance extend our time or shorten it? To imagine dinosaurs and humans side by side is to confront two very different expressions of life's potential. One measured in survival, the other in imagination. One woven into the Earth's cycles, the other bending those cycles to its will. And in that contrast lies a deeper humility. Perhaps greatness is not measured by what we create, but by how long we endure. The dinosaurs had time, vast oceans of it. We have questions. And perhaps the true wonder lies in realizing that both are forms of power, the power to persist and the power to wonder what persistence means. Stories have always been humanity's way of reaching across time. Long before books, long before writing, there were fireside tales, myths whispered from one generation to the next. These stories were not simply entertainment, they were a kind of memory, a way for communities to carry wisdom, warning, and wonder forward through the ages. And sometimes myths hold strange shadows of the natural world, as if the earth itself is speaking through them. It makes us wonder, could the memory of dinosaurs in some distant, indirect way be alive in human storytelling? Consider dragons. Nearly every culture on Earth, from ancient China to medieval Europe to the peoples of the Americas, tells stories of enormous reptilian beasts, scaled, winged, fire-breathing. How curious that civilizations separated by oceans and centuries imagined such similar monsters. Some scholars suggest that ancient people, uncovering enormous fossils in cliffs or riverbeds, interpreted them as the remains of dragons. A curved rib could become the arch of a wing. A massive tooth might be read as evidence of a predator beyond imagining. In a sense, fossils might have seeded legends. The myths of dragons, then, could be cultural echoes of a deep, hidden memory of dinosaurs. Other myths, too, carry hints. The thunderbird of Native American traditions, vast and powerful, flapping its wings with the sound of storms, or the cosmic serpents that wind through the folklore of Africa, Australia, and South America. These beings often straddle the boundary between fear and reverence, much like the ore dinosaurs inspire in us today. Perhaps these stories were not direct memories of dinosaurs, but resonances, human imagination brushing against the remnants of deep time. And then there are giants. Tales of towering beings who once walked the earth can be found in the Hebrew Bible, in Norse sagas, and in Greek mythology. Could it be a coincidence that we, fragile and small in comparison, invented myths of colossal creatures? Or is it a quiet recognition that the bones buried in stone once belonged to beings larger and stranger than ourselves? But mythology offers more than echoes of bones. It also speaks to a memory that is more symbolic than literal. Dinosaurs may represent in the human psyche the idea of deep loss, of vanished worlds. To think of them is to confront impermanence. They remind us that even the most dominant creatures can fall, that the earth itself is not fixed, but shifting, erasing, renewing. In this way, dinosaurs become myth not only through dragons or giants, but through the very archetypes of destruction and rebirth that shape so many human stories. Consider the flood myths found across the globe, from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica. While these are not stories of dinosaurs, they carry the same weight, the idea that worlds end, that civilizations are swept away, leaving only fragments for survivors to interpret. Dinosaurs, too, met their flood, an asteroid, fire, and darkness. Perhaps we are drawn to these stories because they echo something the Earth has already lived through time and again. And there is a gentler layer, too. For children today, dinosaurs are among the first creatures of wonder. Toy dinosaurs fill classrooms and bedrooms. Cartoons bring them to life in vivid colors. In a way, dinosaurs are the closest thing we have to a shared myth of the modern age. They are our universal dragons, beloved and terrifying, gone and yet vividly present in imagination. They shape how we think about time, about survival, about the fragility of existence. In this sense, dinosaurs are more than prehistory. They live in cultural memory, not as living creatures, but as symbols. They are reminders of a forgotten chapter, of power that slipped away, of a world that could vanish in an instant. And that is the essence of myth, not literal truth, but symbolic truth. A truth that whispers something deeper about who we are and what we fear and what we hope. When we tell stories of dragons, thunderbirds, or serpents, perhaps we are not inventing from nothing. Perhaps we are listening, in our own way, to the long-buried echoes of a world that came before us, a world written in stone, but also in imagination. Some scientists suggest that cephalopods, octopuses, cuttlefish, and squid carry the spark of potential. Already their intelligence is astonishing, problem-solving, tool use, and even signs of individual personality. If given another 10 million years, could they build more than coral-like homes? Could they construct, imagine, and record? Their world is the ocean. And maybe that is the most human act of all. Not just to survive, but to remember. To weave memory into myth and myth into meaning. Dinosaurs may be gone, but in our stories they continue to live. Giant, mysterious, and eternal. The story of dinosaurs often ends with a silence. A world of giants undone in an instant, replaced by mammals, forests, oceans reshaped. Yet, if we pause long enough, the story is not only about them, it is also, quietly, about us. Because every tale of extinction is a mirror, a reflection of what might one day happen to humanity. If dinosaurs once dominated and then disappeared, what will one day follow in our footsteps? Let's begin with the scale of time. Humans have been here for a blink. 200,000 years for our species, perhaps 10,000 for civilization as we know it. Against Earth's 4.5 billion years, it is hardly a breath. Dinosaurs had 160 million years to rise, diversify, and vanish. If we imagine a future Earth without us, it becomes easy to see that another intelligence could one day emerge. Perhaps it already has in ways we don't yet recognize. So what might come after us? Vast and largely uncharted, a canvas we barely understand. An octopus civilization may not look anything like ours, but intelligence doesn't need to wear a human face. Or perhaps it will be birds, the living descendants of dinosaurs. Corvids, crows and ravens already astonish us with their cleverness. They use tools, recognize themselves in mirrors, and pass knowledge across generations. Some can even plan for the future, an ability once thought uniquely human. Could the great-grandchildren of these birds inherit the Earth long after our cities crumble into stone? Could there be a civilization of feathered minds filling the skies with patterns we cannot even imagine? The future might not even belong to animals we know well. Rodents, adaptable and resourceful, thrive in every environment humans inhabit. If humanity vanished, rats could inherit the cities, evolving into forms stranger and more capable over deep time. It's unsettling to imagine, but evolution is less about beauty and more about persistence. What survives adapts, what adapts thrives, and what thrives may eventually wander. There is another possibility, too, that intelligence has no single trajectory, that it appears, fades, and reappears like a tide. Dinosaurs may or may not have had their spark. Humans now hold it for however long it lasts. And perhaps, millions of years from now, intelligence will bloom again in a form we could never anticipate. It may not build technology or skyscrapers. It may not even resemble thought as we define it. But it will be a way of knowing the world, of bending it into meaning. The haunting truth is that traces of us will fade far faster than we imagine. A few million years from now, our cities will be gone. Stone erodes, metal rusts, glass shatters. Even plastic, so enduring in our present age, will eventually break down. The Earth is a patient recycler. If an intelligence comes after us, it may never know we existed at all. We, too, could become a forgotten civilization, our story erased except for a thin geological whisper, perhaps a spike of carbon, a trace of nuclear isotopes, an unexplained layer of plastic. That is all that might remain of us. It leads us to a chilling symmetry. We ask whether dinosaurs might have built a world like ours, but perhaps millions of years from now, another intelligence will ask the same question about us. They may find fossilized bones, a scatter of mysterious minerals, a sudden shift in the record of climate. And they may wonder, who were they? What did they dream? What did they leave behind? Speculative futures remind us of humility. We are not guaranteed permanence. We are one chapter in a much larger book, an ancient book, still being written by oceans, forests, and skies. Dinosaurs had their reign, and it ended. Ours, too, will end, though we do not yet know how or when. The question is not if, but what next. And perhaps, just as we imagine them, someone will imagine us. In that act of wondering, the story continues. We become part of a cycle where every intelligence wonders whether it was the first or merely one among many. So when we look at the stars tonight, or walk beneath the trees, or listen to the silence after rain, we might pause and remember, we are not the end. We are a moment, brief and luminous, in the long unfolding of life. The earth was alive before us, and it will be alive after us. And in that future, something new will rise, something that will look back and ask the same questions we are asking Now that is the quiet gift of imagining speculative futures. They remind us not only that the dinosaurs may have dreamed, but that dreaming itself may be one of the most ancient and most enduring patterns of life. Dear listener, we have traveled far tonight. From the familiar story of dinosaurs as towering creatures of the past to the strange possibility that they might have built lives, cultures, or even technologies in ways we can hardly imagine. Along the way, we explored how intelligence flickers across the animal kingdom, among octopuses, crows, dolphins, and even humble ants, and how it might have flickered long before us, and could one day flicker again after we are gone. As we come to the quiet close of our journey, it is worth pausing to gather the threads together. What have we really been asking? Not simply whether dinosaurs created machines or whether bones in stone conceal a secret story, but something deeper. What it means to be part of time so vast that our own lives, even our own civilizations, feel like sparks in the night. Dinosaurs remind us of humility. For 160 million years, they thrived. Entire species rose and fell long before the first human ancestor took its first hesitant step. Compared to them, our story is a fraction of a second. And yet, we often speak of ourselves as the pinnacle, the inevitable outcome of evolution, as though intelligence were destined to culminate in us. But perhaps that's a comforting illusion. Perhaps intelligence is not a destination but a passing light, a pattern that emerges when the conditions are right, and then fades when the world changes again. This thought can be unsettling, but it can also be strangely freeing. If we are not the first and will not be the last, then we are not burdened with being the sole keepers of meaning. We are simply participants in a much longer conversation, one written not only in language and symbols, but in the very fabric of life itself. Think, for a moment, of the traces we leave. A footprint on a path, a handprint on a wall, a word spoken into the dark. Over time, almost all of it disappears. Even our greatest cities will someday crumble into dust. But disappearance does not mean irrelevance. The dinosaurs, though gone, shaped the world we inherited. They became the birds that sing above us. They left lessons in bones, in evolution, in extinction. Our own story, too, will ripple forward in ways we cannot foresee. And so when we ask whether dinosaurs could have been like us, we are also asking whether we will someday be like them, remembered not in detail, but in faint echoes, fossils, myths, mysteries, a presence without a clear story. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps it is even beautiful, because the truth is, not everything needs to be solved. Not every riddle must be answered. Sometimes the most meaningful thing we can do is wonder. Wonder stretches time. Wonder connects us with those who came before and those who will come after. Wonder makes us part of a lineage much older and wider than humanity itself, and maybe that's the quiet gift of this thought experiment. Dinosaurs may never have built cities, but in imagining that they could have, we are reminded that imagination itself is the most precious thing we carry. It is what allows us to bridge the known and the unknown. It is what allows us to feel awe in the face of mystery. So let us close with this image. The earth, vast and ancient, turning slowly beneath a sky full of stars. On its surface, life comes and goes, dinosaurs once, humans now, something else one day to come. Civilizations may rise and fall, but the cycle continues. And within that cycle, every intelligence, no matter how brief, carries the same spark, the ability to ask, what if? And as you drift now into the quiet of your own thoughts, you might carry this gentle truth with you. We are not the first, and we are not the last. We are simply here, now, alive in this fleeting moment, with the gift of curiosity, the gift of wonder, the gift of being able to imagine. And perhaps in the end, that is enough.